Hi everybody, this is Benjamin Turner. I'm a military chaplain with US SOCOM, and I am making part 3 of a video about unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UAPs, UAPs. And again, this is part 3. See my preceding 2 videos. One recounts my own encounter with extraterrestrial craft, or possibly hybrid craft, in Canada. That goes on for a little over an hour. I think that video is about an hour and 40 minutes long. And then I make a briefer synopsis, amending some of my narrative, the phraseology, in part 2. This is part 3, in which I'll provide updated information about the experiences of individuals like Travis Walton, and also the U.S. actor, celebrity Jackie Gleason, etc., multiple other topics. I need to get my light on and some paperwork out in order to proceed. But Jackie Gleason information, I was able to verify that, as mentioned, Jackie Gleason was brought by then President Nixon, U.S. President Nixon, to Homestead Air Force Base in Florida under military escort to view deceased extraterrestrial bodies. And as stated, one of his houses, Jackie Gleason had a lifelong interest in UFOs. One of his houses was shaped like a UFO, and he called it the Mothership. And it's still in existence to this day. But you know, that's his recounting and his narrative. But I could corroborate that Nixon did know Jackie Gleason personally, because he wrote about it in his private journals, which are available for public perusal. So that's an actual fact. I'm running out of batteries in my headset. Actually, I don't need my headset. So that's interesting to know. Also, a little more detail about the aliens. So yeah, he saw 4 autopsies, and he said that in addition to the other features that I mentioned, he had the aliens had large ears. Their ears were pronounced. They were larger than usual ears. So often you don't hear about them having any sort of external ear, cartilage and so forth, or the alien version of cartilage. But in this instance, they had pretty big ears, apparently. Although they were I believe that they were shorter reptoid aliens that he saw. So, but Nixon actually knew him. That's actually that's a fact, because it's there in the Nixon library that they knew each other. They met at a country club, I believe it was, and I think that at some point Nixon needed to confide in somebody. I'm pretty sure that's how that goes. Let me give you some more information. Travis Walton, I said missing for 3 days. He was actually missing for 5 days. I think it was 5 days and 6 hours. And the movie Fire in the Sky is, I think that it does an adequate job in reflecting the unfoldment of Travis's story, but I think that it took some liberties. I'm not sure that he was found entirely naked. In the movie, he's entirely naked when he's located, and I said he was like 80 to 100 miles away. That was another case where the woman was abducted and found like 80 miles away from her house, unfortunately. But let's see here. In Travis's instance, I'm not sure. I don't think that he was necessarily found very far outside of Snowflake, if he was outside of Snowflake, Arizona at all, which is where he was taken. But I'm not sure. But he was gone for over 5 days. So I wanted to add that precision. And let me get out my information here, which it is actually right here, and notes for part 3. So this pyramid, I believe the town is called Nokomis, or that's the area. It's a Native American name, and I think it's in South Dakota. And the additional information I have about it, one source I read, I said that they spent $6 billion. The U.S. government spent $6 billion on the place. That's actually true. And then $6 million on the place, and closed it in under 24 hours. I had said originally under a week, and then someone said under 3 days, but I think that I'm not sure if that's official or not, but I can't imagine that it was open for more than a week, because I saw it closed it after a week, closed it after 3 days, closed it under 24 hours, so I'm pretty sure they didn't even really open it. They opened it and then closed it right away, probably within 24 hours, like it said in the news. And I'm not sure, it's some sort of anti-ballistic missile launch station, or was. I want to specify, excuse me, David Adair. I think he developed. I have to look at the science more closely, because I get confused between what he developed and how he describes the technology on the extraterrestrial engine on which he worked. But I think I think what David Adair developed is a kind of fusion containment engine. There are 61 different propulsion systems, according to his information, that you can leave the planet with. I'm quoting from his interview. And I will, under separate cover, I'll provide you more technical information from him and Bob Lazar as well. I'll take a look at it. So this is somewhat disturbing. Should it prove to be true, Archuleta Mesa near Dulce, New Mexico, has an underground base jointly run by aliens with military personnel. In Dulce, New Mexico, and it's home to some horrible human experimentation, according to the information I uncovered, unfortunately. So one of the situations where it has to be researched, we have to understand the fallout and the truth in order to assert to the world what ought to be the truth. And it has some sort of tie to Kirtland Air Force Base. The gentleman's last name was Benowitz. He's now deceased. Who was, I think, a victim of experimentation there. I'm not really sure, or he was harassed by military operatives. And it's a sad story. I don't know, but I don't know all the information. But that's the location. That's in Dulce. I have more information about the TR-3B. TR-3B is also known as the Black Manta, and it absolutely does not exist. There's no record. There are no records of it being a product of anything to do with any U.S. or overseas craft designer or contractor. It's entirely speculative. That's the one I mentioned. I believe I was taken by, and as I stated, I have seen actual pictures of the thing subsequent to that. But in the lore, it's known as the Black Manta. Okay. Also, it's alleged to be anti-gravitational. As I mentioned, we don't have the technology for that in the world, and we don't have anti-gravity technology. So this craft of ship is known in the lore as a flux liner. That's what the covert black ops people call it. Similar to, but not identical to, the Aurora. I shouldn't say that, because I don't think that they're necessarily that similar, beyond the fact that the Aurora is triangular. But someone took out a patent on it. His last name is Pais, and he patented what, in quotes, a craft using a mass inertial reduction device. Okay, so believed to be that deployed by the TR-3B. And there have been sightings of these black triangles over Antelope Valley, California in recent years. The craft uses highly pressurized mercury accelerated by nuclear energy. When I mentioned that, and that could also be part of the, I believe that could be part of the cloaking too, I'm not sure. But there's a plasma produced, the plasma produces a field of anti-gravity around the craft. And there's an electromagnetic coil at the heart of its power system. And then it gets into something to do with over my head in terms of much more, this might have to do with quantum mechanics or just really advanced physics, but something called a Higgs field. It interacts with the Higgs field at the quantum level. The electromagnetic coil does. I have no idea. We'd have to talk to one of the engineers to figure that out. But this is I received this. Doesn't use conventional turbine or rocket technology. And the propulsion system is designed in a way, and I think that it has some sort of thrust mechanism on each of the corners that enable it to make perfect right-angle turns. So if you can imagine, the U.S. doesn't have a craft like that, but it wishes it did, because this thing can come, go wherever it wants, move like this, and then just shoot off in whatever direction it wants. You know, it can pivot and then just go wherever it wants, like a flying saucer. Mid-course correction is easily obtained by way of the design, but also the fact that it's anti-gravitational. There's a slight humming noise that it produces, but I'm sure that you don't hear it if you're over a sand dune, or if you're more than several hundred yards. If you're, however many yards away, I'm sure it is virtually silent. But the gentleman who presented this said that the anti-gravity tactics dates back to World War II and something known as Operation Paperclip, which I've referred to before. Operation Paperclip was the conversion of Nazi technology by the U.S. government. The U.S. government worked with Nazis to obtain some form of, forms of science that were deployed by the Nazis. That probably ties to the problem with the torture facilities in the U.S. as well. So we're talking about tricks of gravitation and quantum gravity and manipulation of scientific forces through theories of general relativity and so forth. Right, in the U.S., I think that it's still the case that they say that the Aurora doesn't exist. And I'm not sure what that means because I also read that the project had been recently declassified. So I'm not sure what the official stance is in 2022. Sorry. But the Aurora has a pulse wave detection engine. And this could be David Adair. I'm not sure where the note comes from, and I don't know which craft to which this refers, but there's a note here that the detonation of, there's a difference between a charge of air and fuel mix, like regular rocket fuel, and the detonation of fuel. There's a difference chemically and by way of physics. So these advanced craft are supposedly detonating fuel rather than using it conventionally. The Aurora, and I think, well, the SR-72, at the very least, the Blackbird, which is a known craft, is titanium with paneling to avoid detection. So that's a recurring theme. So the design of the paneling helps the avoidance of detection. The way that the designer of the SR-72 designed the SR-72 was so that had he not used the special design, it would be like on radar, enemy radar, the difference between seeing a whole house in the sky, spotting that on radar, and then or just spotting the front door. That's how much you could sort of reduce the footprint. A Boeing Stratotanker, a professional pilot in a Boeing reported triangular craft. That's there as well in the annals. And these projects are really in the military referred to as NGAD, Next Generation Air Dominance, or NGAD. And one of the concerns is next generation fusion sensor capabilities and the elimination or the avoidance of both infrared and radar signatures. So, right, the paneling of the craft will help the pilot, avoid radar signature. But there's also a problem with infrared because heat trails and so forth show up on infrared. So I think, and it could be the SR-72, but one American spy plane is notable for using cooling system, an advanced cooling system, and a large part of the engineering has to do with how to cool the fuel to lower the infrared imprint. I think that might be the Blackbird as well. One's been spotted recently with a mirror-like coating, and some speculate that that's the F-22 Super Raptor. But I don't know if we have released the Super Raptor yet. It could be a test for the Super Raptor. The JFK, I'll skip to that really quickly. Right, I refer to it as a boat. Yeah, that's I'm being facetious. It's not a boat; it's a ship. It's a weaponized aircraft carrier. It's huge. I mean, it's a huge military craft. The name Area 51 was originally an Atomic Energy Commission designation. That's where Area 51 comes from, is the AEC. And then I have just notes, Area 51, they worked on the U-2 spy plane, which was put into service in '56. and was the highest plane at the time. And the A-12 was also called the Ox Cart. So when you see Project Ox Cart among the list of top secret governmental projects, Ox Cart, yes, it's an Area 51 project. Ox Cart is the A-12, which is also, the A-12 is also known as the Ox Cart. The Echo flight incident was a Minuteman missile crisis in which I believe it was 10 Minuteman missiles were disabled, apparently by extraterrestrial craft. There is this history of the Air Force officers having to call it in because they didn't know what was going on. I need to get you information about the 12 people who were appointed Majestic 12. They're the people Truman appointed to have all the insider information about, I think it was Truman. It could have been started by Eisenhower. I really have to look at my presidential history. But we should know who those people are. Betty and Barney Hill, yeah, I don't want to mischaracterize anybody's story. I don't know that they were independently tested as far as the memory is concerned. I know that they were hypnotized and they went through hypnotic, I don't know if they used the term regression, but they recovered the memories through hypnosis for both Betty and Barney went through that. And I don't, the extent to which she was traumatized, I don't want to speak for that. To the best of my knowledge, the transcripts will reveal that she was quite upset and having to, upon reliving what actually occurred there. But that would be interesting to study additionally. There was some sort of, in my reading, they followed the thing, they saw the thing, and then they started following up the road, or he just was compelled to turn up a road in New Hampshire in the mountains, and they didn't know that the thing had landed, that the thing had been following their car, and so maybe he tried to get away from it. I'm not sure. I'll have to look at that. But when they came around the corner, they thought there were workers in the road because it looked like a roadblock. There were all sorts of lights on the road, and then they saw people coming towards them, and then they realized that it was the people on the craft that had been following them. And at that point, it was too late. But there was some sort of magnetic electrical charge, and that resonated with me when I heard that. At the beginning and at the end of the event, I think that when they came to again upon recollection, there was some sort of repetition of a electromagnetic field around them. It's a convincing part and a memorable part of their narrative. I made a couple spoken errors. I said, not knowing if I had forgotten my close encounter / abduction, or if I had been forced to forget. And I said, well, being forced to forget something is odd. That's entirely unclear. What I meant to say was, it's being forced to forget something, I think, is not always possible. I think under very rare circumstances can anybody be forced to forget. You can choose to not remember something, maybe, if you work at it yourself personally, if you take the initiative. But to have someone else point a finger or a power and say, you now will forget this, I think that's inaccurate. And I think that people get confused narratives, including about brainwashing, that occur in torture facilities, quote-unquote mental hospitals and so forth, here and overseas. People speak in terms of brainwashing. Brainwashing is really the installation of the fear that you'll be killed if you recount forbidden information, or reveal your captors or that sort of thing. And as opposed to what people think it is, as a result of all the media about it, which is you will now turn into another person entirely and have no recollection of who it was that you were before. That's not really brainwashing. Brainwashing is a form of psychological torture where you'll believe that you'll be killed if you don't comply with directives. So it's important, when I say whether or not I could remember or was permitted to remember, because I think that if someone points a power at you and says your brain will now not function anymore for this particular part of the memory, if someone actually suppresses a memory, that it must be an extraterrestrial force of some kind. Right. Nellis controls Air Force Base, controls and supervises the airspace across southern Nevada. That's the area indicated. And as I stated, it's Edwards that actually controls Area 51. They're in charge of that testing range. But Nellis services. How does that work? Let me think for a minute. Well, the secret flight actually runs out of McCarran, so the secret flight to get there is actually out of Las Vegas at McCarran International Airport. The governmental secret airline is part of McCarran. It's hidden within McCarran at a place called the Gold Coast Terminal, as I said, with the unmarked Boeings and the unmarked Beechcraft. So I'm sure that they must fly out of Nellis at some point, but the secret airline operates out of McCarran and not Nellis. And Nellis Air Force Base actually controls airspace 4808 north, which is Area 51. So you have Edwards controlling the facility and then in the range, and then Nellis working with Nellis to control the airspace with a secret flight going out of Vegas. It's not the TV show I watched as a child from that association I told you about. It was not called Project Blue Book. It was called Project UFO. Just something to look up if you want. Early 80s, hilariously directed and shot recreations of UFO encounters. Project UFO. Bob Lazar said that he thought that what he saw down there, he heard information that it was ancient and that it had been recovered as part of some sort of archaeological dig. So that's new information. The program in which I work is called Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP. AATIP. And they're not UFOs anymore, they're UAPs, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. I need to give you information about Skinwalker Ranch. Right, and I totally agree with Bob Lazar too about intentional distortions of time. He brings that up briefly, and I have briefly studied that. That's really a quantum mechanics issue that ought to be mined by intentional distortions of time. I mean, the craft, in my experience and view, utilize that. We need to look at the congressional session that happened this month, last month, because I will tell you that in recent months, and it could have been as long ago as last year, but reports came out with video, complete with video, by Air Force personnel who had been flying along the ocean when they spotted this thing. They tracked it, and I can link you to it. They released it publicly. It's not classified, but it is Air Force material, and they tracked it, and you can see the ocean, and then you can see like a dot or a round object, and it's kind of black, and it looks like a shadow. You can't see the hull really, but it looks like a shadow of a hull, and it's rapidly moving over the water. But the way that the camera, the pilot had it on his camera, and it's two pilots, it's two male pilots, and they're tracking it. So yeah, you can see that it's moving sort of, but it's so limited in frame. The shot is so limited in frame that you don't really have a perspective on the water. And as the plane's moving, you kind of assume that the object that is shadowed in shadow is moving, in part because they say that it's moving based upon how it's going over the ocean. It's not a very clear shot of the ocean. It's not a very clear shot of the craft. And also, you can't really tell that it's moving. They're very excited about it because they can see it. And they're like, what is that thing? And it's going so fast, and they have no idea what it is. And they're Air Force pilots. And so they're going on and on about it. But the shot itself, to me, was not at all impressive. I wasn't impressed by it. I'm impressed by the story, but not by the actual footage, because to me, it just is nothing. But at the congressional hearing in May, they they had the weirdest, funkiest footage, new footage that probably was just being released at that point by the government that I had never seen before, and I've seen everything. I've seen everything before. So when I saw that, I was like, they can't be really showing what I think that they're going to show, because I thought it would be really interesting if they had like a split second shot of something where you could actually see it, because the proposition is that these things are moving just all over the place, so that you can't even really track them. They're moving so quickly. But they took split a different episode than the two male pilots took split second photography. You can barely when you see the regular filmed photography, you see it looks like a speck going by really quickly, and it is so fast that it could be a flaw in the film. That's how quickly the thing. You wouldn't even think twice about it, and you certainly wouldn't think about it unless somebody said something. If someone had said nothing to you in advance of it, you wouldn't even notice it. But if someone says there's possible UAP within this frame, you'd look and you'd say, well, and then this thing goes by really quickly. But they're like, that could be it, because what? It looks like film damage or whatever, video damage. But they took a split second shot of the thing, and I got a really, really quick glimpse of it, because I had turned off. I was in the process of turning off the congressional hearing for another reason, as I was being distracted by something else. And as I looked over, I could see it, and they could only see it for a second as well. And yeah, they got a shot. I'll have to find it for you guys. I'll bookmark it for you. As that thing went by really quickly. This is the impressive recovery. Data recovery for me. They got a shot at this thing, and it's a metal probe, and it's like, what? And this is U.S. Air Force, and it's some sort of like ultrasonic or hypersonic metal probe, and nobody knows what it is. And when I figured out what was going on, I had to pick my jaw up off the table, because it was great. A lot of the times, as I said, I've seen so many of these things that I've seen all the really famous fakes. And the early fakes, when people first started doing it, as I said, people would throw a hubcap in the air and get their kids to take a picture of it, and then you know what I mean? And then they'd phone the local papers or whatever. But and but Top Secret UFO Files is mentioned too. You go through those and you see all the fakes, and then the government will go in, or the military will go in and do this. If they want you to see what they've actually recovered, you have to have the wisdom to discern between the BS. That's how I found my TR-3B. They slipped me a shot of it. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. So the Blackbird, and the Blackbird information, there's a lot of it, and it's really penetrating and interesting, and I don't do it full justice here, but I have some information. The designer was a man named C. Kelly Johnson, and actually, the Blackbird SR-71, which is a stealth fighter, he had seen and reported to flying saucers himself in advance of designing the thing. It's actually historically archived that he not only did he actually witness UFOs, he made formal reports of UFOs, and people wonder if the SR-71 is not based upon what he saw. They speculate whether or not he did that. I think it's referred to as blended wing fuselage. It has stubby wings by design. One of the sightings took place in 1953, December 15th, 1953. So this goes back. I think it's a Mach 3 titanium airframe with stealth. I think I could get you the location of I think this is enough of a preliminary update, but let me tell you a little bit about the pyramid. It's in South Dakota.